I recorded this talk to a group of small business owners in Tucson, Arizona on April 26th. But of course we had trouble with the recording, so we're attempting to record it again in the Zaccari Associates offices in Sacramento, California. Now, as someone who works with angel investors, a statement that we hear far too often is, I'm following the established best practice, yet I'm failing or I'm struggling. Now, best practice is a term that drives me absolutely crazy. Best practice is a point in time. It is not gospel, and it is not a forever thing. In fact, if you're following the established best practice and it's not working for you, then it's not a best practice, is it? What I tell people over and over again is what we should be looking for is the next practice, something that sets you apart. Now, why do I say this? History is littered with organizations who religiously followed their established best practice all the way to extinction. Let me give you some examples. When the telephone industry was regulated, the only place you could get a telephone was from Western Electric. Now, you couldn't buy the phone, you had to rent it forever. Now, Western Electric did give you some choices. You had a choice of color, the color was black, and you had a choice of style. You could mount it on the wall, or you could put it on your desk. That's it. That's all there was. Now, when the industry deregulated several years later, people could actually buy a phone. And they didn't want a black phone. They wanted a red phone, or a princess phone, or a Mickey Mouse phone. But Western Electric continued to follow the established best practice for manufacturing efficiency, which is to make a limited number of models. Western Electric no longer exists. A&P. A&P was the first great supermarket chain. A&P's best practice was every store has the exact same item in the exact same location. That's incredible efficiency. What A&P failed to realize was the changing taste of the consumers. A&P's theory was, look, we know what you need. You just come and get what we have. A&P no longer exists. The companies who survive and thrive are disruptive organizations. Now, these are people who say, yeah, I hear what the established best practice is, but what if we did this? And you know who these companies are. They're Apple and Amazon and Google and Facebook, and you can name a dozen others yourself. What these organizations said was, the best practice isn't the best for me. And it changed the world. Another thing I tell people is to please be smart enough to realize and understand that innovation comes from the fringes of your company. It does not come from the boardroom. Now, Starbucks is a great example of this. When Starbucks first started up in Seattle, it had a horrible location. On one corner was a coffee shop named Tully's. In the middle of the block was the original Starbucks. At the end of the block was another coffee shop called Seattle's Best. 3 coffee shops, 1 block. They all followed the then established best practice, which was coffee-only drinks. So coffee, cappuccino, espresso, lattes, etc. Okay? None of them had a blender. A blender was not part of the established best practice. A blender slows down the line. A blender increased costs. And for God's sakes, in the mid-1980s, no one dreamed anyone would spend $5 for a coffee drink. Yet despite all that, one young woman, a Starbucks employee, brought her own blender from home. And she started making blended drinks. And she put them out for the customers to sample. And the customers loved them. Now, Starbucks, to its credit, said, wow, we might be onto something here. And they created the next practice. Now, how do you think that worked for Starbucks? In 2017, Starbucks generated $24.4 billion in revenue. Now, depending on what reports you read, 50 to 60% of that revenue came from blended drinks. So if we do some quick math, that's somewhere between 12 to $14 billion that was generated because one young woman challenged the established best practice and changed the coffee industry forever. Now, as business owners, we have to make some decisions. We can continue blindly following the established best practice and more than likely fail. Or we can say, what if, and possibly change the world. If you're ready to say, what if, and change your world, call me. Let's talk. I'll help you. Thank you.